Thanks to everybody that's had the chance to join in today. Super excited to present a panel around a really interesting concept that we're working on internally with a lot of different organizations. And that topic, as you know, is creating a holistic identity and SaaS management strategy internally in your organizations. And what we're going to be talking about and focusing on today is really combining technologies to drive compliance, cost savings, and software strategy within your organizations. And those technologies are single sign-on and identity, as well as SaaS management platforms. We're super excited to bring together a panel today that includes industry leaders from ZoomInfo, a customer of both Okta and Xylos, Okta on the line as well as Beyond Idea, services partner for both Okta and Xylos. We're going to discuss how to build and implement an integrated single sign-on strategy and a SaaS management strategy as well. And we'll discuss how we bring those stakeholders together, build the foundation around that strategy and those programs, utilize SaaS management to save dollars, to drive compliance, and how to create an actionable strategy for your own internal organization's growth. So really fun concepts and a lot of passionate folks on the line. A few housekeeping items to take care of very quickly. As a really special thank you to everybody that's on the line, every attendee will be given the option to receive either a $25 Grubhub gift card, small little plug there for a customer of ours, Grubhub, as to support local restaurants or to have the webinar. Any of you webinar sponsors can also donate $25 to the Khan Academy. They're a nonprofit with the mission to provide a free world-class education for anyone, anywhere. And our partners at Okta brought this nonprofit directly to us. This webinar is a great opportunity for us to jump in and help support an amazing organization. So you'll have those two options that come up here shortly. A few other housekeeping items to chat through very quickly is we're going to leave some time, hopefully, for Q&A at the end of the conversation. So we'll provide, back and forth for about 45, 50 minutes. So if any of you have any questions that you'd like to submit, please do so on the Zoom link. We're also going to have 2 polls throughout the seminar or throughout the webinar. That's where you'll be able to provide your feedback on the fly. Would love your participation there. And then lastly, just to tie a bow on the survey at the end as well, we'll launch that brief survey at the very end of the webinar, and that's where we'll collect your information to provide the $25 gift card to Grubhub or a $25 donation to the Khan Academy. Okay, so without further ado, we will dive into the content and start by introducing our panelists. So I'll go one at a time, but everybody, thanks for joining us today. I'd love for you guys to expand a little bit on your roles within your company, maybe give a little bit of a brief description of your company as well, Liz, and we'll go through that. Talk about your role, your organization, and how this all kind of comes together. So Liz, we will start with you. I would love for you to give a brief introduction.
Well, fantastic. Number one, thanks for inviting me. I think I've already told everyone here, I think I have the best job at my company. I'm our director of procurement at ZoomInfo, which means I get the opportunity to engage every stakeholder with our business for anything that they're buying. And for me, that means I get to be surrounded by world-class technology. I get to talk through all the problems, and I get to be a hero a lot of times when we're buying things. And so that's been a huge growth space for us, especially because as a high growth B2B and sales intelligence platform, we are using tons and tons of just technology in general and SaaS specifically. We are a cloud first organization. And so as we kind of look through this, it's a really fun thing to have a captive audience to talk to. And beyond working for ZoomInfo, I also am a instructor at the University of Portland Pamplin School of Business, where I teach graduate students about negotiation and persuasion. So I'm really happy to be here. Thanks.
That's awesome, Liz. I love it. As a former procurement guy myself, I love to geek out on various topics, and that's great that you're that you're at the university kind of delivering negotiation tactics. That's amazing. Justin, I'd love to turn it over to you very quickly. Justin is a senior customer success manager at Okta. Can you go into that just a little bit for us, Justin?
Yeah, Thanks a lot, Corey. Great to be here as well. So, as Corey said, my name is Justin Conrad. I'm a senior CSM at Okta. I actually have a pretty unique role. I think it's becoming more prevalent in technology. So my responsibility is post-sales account management and really making sure that the customers that I work with are adopting and utilizing the licenses and the investment that they made in Okta.
Yeah, very quickly, let me follow that up, Justin. When you talk about Okta value at its highest level, what does that mean at Okta internally today?
Yeah, so I think one of our core values is actually customer success. So we really pride ourselves in making sure that all of our customers are successful with, the investment that they make in Okta. So I think, security and user experience have really been on the forethought of a lot of our customers. So just making sure that they are successful in the tools that they have through Okta.
That's awesome. Thank you so much. Arun, CEO and co-founder of Beyond ID, please provide a little bit of an introduction.
That's great. Thank you, Corey. Thanks for inviting me. Very excited to be here and joining force here in sharing some insights. My name is Arun Shrestha, and I'm CEO and co-founder of Beyond ID. Beyond ID is a partner of both Okta and Xylo. And what we do is we specialize in acquiring and deploying and managing the cloud and cybersecurity platform for our customers. I've been in IT industry for close to 25 plus years, and I've seen a lot of things evolve over time, and I'm very excited to be seeing a lot of companies migrating to cloud. And we're just, an organization that happen to have expertise in helping companies migrate to cloud and using a cybersecurity platform in as seamless as possible. And because of our background and some, battle scars out there, we have some insight and knowledge of how to do this effectively. And, we're just sharing that with our customers and helping many companies to become more secure and more productive.
That's great. Thanks, Arun. And for everybody else, I'm Corey Wheeler. I head up all customer success and services at Xylo, one of the co-founders of the company as well. Spent many years like Liz in procurement, and that experience really led me to jump in and launch Xylo back in 2016. Fundamentally, software has changed. The on-prem world of audits, the on-prem world of knowing where all of your software is and having it centralized is a thing of the past. And software has now become a fully decentralized category across all enterprises. And that means that everybody in the company is interested in software, has needs for software. They're driving value with software. So we launched Xylo really to be at the heart of that, driving decisions and bringing all of that information together to help companies put a strategy around a very decentralized area, understand what's in their environment, how it's being used, and be able to drive optimization and management of that in a better way going forward. So at Xylo, we're very, very, very passionate about SaaS and everything that we do. A couple of ancillary areas there, security has always been a core part of our value prop at Xylo. But really now, and I want to hit on this with you guys as we chat, now more than ever, it's becoming more and more important. We're in the age of the COVID global pandemic, and everybody is moving to a remote culture, and SaaS and cloud technologies have really come to the forefront, driving strategy for companies. They've also come to the forefront for companies that are trying to make sure they're controlling OpEx and using essential services and using vital and essential tools that they need going forward. So there's definitely a couple of different ways that we're seeing SaaS viewed in the market, very strategically, but also with a tight eye around cost containment going forward. But we've got a great panel today. So to bring everybody together, one of our services partners that delivers end-to-end support, bringing in Okta, the single sign-on solution, and then Xylo and talking to a customer around it should be a lot of fun. So thanks for joining us today. So today, we're going to dive into what that successful partnership between Okta, Xylo, and ZoomInfo, and then services partners really means. What is that true partnership where each team brings value to the table and we're all able to set a plan in motion based on mutual system value? We're going to walk through, kind of start off with the basic need for identity and SaaS management. Why do companies need it today? Identifying what that problem is. We'll talk through how you start that initiative, what stakeholders you bring together, bring to the table that are most interested in driving identity and SaaS management value. And then we're going to talk through our high-level process, which you see on the screen right now, which is feedback, around how to think about and roll out an identity and SaaS management program. And there's 4 real steps to that process, and that's establishing a single view of all software throughout your organization, maximizing the value of those licenses, analyzing the Okta and the utilization detail to understand how you're using software paired with your identity strategy, and then really extending that security across your network. These are the core components of any joint Okta and Xylo program or identity and SaaS management program that we'll dive into. And we'll hear how Liz has rolled that out internally at ZoomInfo as well. So this has all created an actionable strategy for growth, both today in the era of COVID and remote work, and also starting to look to the new normal of what that will be for the future of work. So let's get into it. First, we want to start off with identifying that problem. And you should see a poll launch here shortly to address that. But Liz, I'd love to start with you here. Where were you in terms of identity management and visibility of software prior to engaging with Okta and Xylo? What did you know about your environment?
Right. Well, great question. So I guess a little bit of background about ZoomInfo, right? So ZoomInfo was purchased by Discover.org in February of last year. So they were 2 of the leading B2B companies. Each of them had a fairly high gravity of employees, about 500 employees on either side. And we were talking about what does that look like when we bring 2 organizations like that together? We didn't have a unified identity management platform, and we also didn't have any way for us to really have visibility into really what we were spending, what our technology stack looked like, why we were making decisions about different products. So we were at square one before we implemented an organization-wide solution for both. Yeah. And we actually went through, and when we did this, we went Xylo first. And so that's been a really exciting stepping stone, because the first question was trying to establish what we had. What did our baseline look like? What did the overall organization, and where should we put priorities as far as that kind of visibility?
That's awesome. Yeah, we talk a lot about that with our customers today, and also with Okta. Discovery is everything. If you don't know what you've got, if you don't know the applications that you're using, if you're not able to scope out this massive area, at least from an optimization perspective or a strategic management perspective, you're not really sure of what you need to secure, where your risk is, and how you need to be executing renewals and extensions and the security around all of that. So just,
right, and that,
go ahead, Liz.
But I was going to say, one of those things about, when we talk about negotiation, knowing what you want to achieve and having a goal in mind is so incredibly important. And for you to have that goal be articulated, you need to know where you're coming from. Yeah. And what kinds of, what your baseline is. What are you actually spending on it? How many people are using the product? Are you getting a maximum price to value?
Yeah, love that. Justin, following that conversation up, what are the first things that enterprises come to you for? What problems are they trying to solve initially around identity? What's that first step that you'll hear from a prospect when they say, hey, want to talk to you guys, here's our biggest need?
Yeah, I think there's a couple different things. So the need for agility, I think, especially now in today's environment, companies need to be agile. They need to be able to pivot and make changes, and whether that be from security changes or enabling end users to now work remotely. I think, especially a lot of the conversations that we've been having now is how do companies expand their security posture outside of their office. So, majority of my customers, used to have only a small subset of customers or end users that would work remotely. And now with kind of what we're going through, they've had to pivot, and now their entire workforce is now remote. So how do they, both balance the security side of things, as well as making sure that now all of their end users are still productive and still are able to get what they need to accomplish completed at home.
Yeah, I love that, Justin. One of the kind of a side story is when we first started going through the COVID crisis and moved our company remote, the first two technologies that I thought of were Zoom, obviously we're on that right now, as well as Okta. Both organizations are poised to embrace the remote shift and really start to exponentially drive value. So I'm excited to see where Okta goes going forward.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. And Arun, what are customers coming to you for? Joint customers or singular customers? Where is Beyond ID really able to take the identity and the SaaS management strategy and take that to the next level?
That's great, Corey. Yeah. So to add to what Justin was saying, if you what's happened in the last several years is the work perimeter has changed, right? So it's from going from corporate network to anyone working from anywhere, using any devices, any applications. So the world changed a lot, and especially the last few weeks, that's actually even shifted dramatically in terms of the need for anyone working from anywhere, and making sure that the companies are establishing work environment that makes everyone productive in serving the customer and communities. So the trend is also accelerating in terms of increasingly companies are adopting more SaaS application that needs to be managed and secured. We also see that there are so many applications. There's so many ways of doing things, and what we see is that companies are looking for help with the resources and expertise to execute their strategy as seamlessly as possible. What does that mean? Well, there's always a challenge in terms of if you don't have some experience doing this before. So having resources that have gone there before, done this for, if not hundreds, thousands of customers, that's the value add. And so that's where the customers reach out to us and really in search of someone that understand how the SaaS management and especially around identity on single sign-on, their strategy and how to establish a proper game plan to do this the right way. And so we see a lot of that growing, and especially the last few weeks, we're seeing an uptick of the requests coming from many customers to, in fact, accelerating their plan of becoming digitally transformed. So we see a lot of that. Yeah.
Justin, I'd love to know from you, talking on COVID and picking up on the themes that we've spent the last couple of minutes on, you and I have talked in the past around flexibility, but as it specifically relates to COVID, how is Okta maneuvering around that and with it to drive additional value to your customers?
Yeah, I think that's a great question. I think a lot of the value that, customers now get from Okta, moving to remote has been value that they've already had there. And it's really just kind of fine tuning and making a few different changes to set them up for success. I think, Arun, you've made a great point, talking about how boundaries are changing. In the past, it used to be networks and firewalls, the final boundary, but now it's people. How do you secure people? How do you secure their access and different things like that? And really it's, they've had the tools. It's now just, like I said, just making those fine-tuned changes to set them up for success.
Yeah, and then I'd love to hear your input on this, Liz. You guys are SaaS forward, cloud forward. Was there a big shift that was needed when you moved fully remote? What were some of those learnings?
Well, I think part of this is we had a culture that really was energized by being surrounded by each other. Yeah. And so how did we translate that? How do we maintain that kind of communication layer? And we've also been a company that really prides ourselves on being lean and about avoiding value leakage. Yeah. So a lot of the tools, right? So our platform helps you to hit your number wherever you are, right? It accelerates your sales funnel. And the same way that if I can see tools aren't being used in Xylo, in our tool, if you're not having a full funnel, we know that you aren't getting the full value out of your products. And so as we started looking at what we needed to do to pivot, we needed to get people at some sort of parity of function and really that kind of engagement. So being able to see how frequent people are logging in. Are they using the tools that they have access to? Where are we finding that, you know, content is dropping off and that we didn't need to engage? All of those were questions that especially get emphasized when spend control is at a peak.
You're preaching to the choir. We have all of our customer base. Right now is when the rubber meets the road for adoption.
Right.
You know, in a fully remote culture and you have all of these tools that are at your disposal, is the adoption where it needs to be? I think you can very quickly get to value on your applications in a remote world where everybody has to rely on those solutions. So this is the true north right now. And when we sit down with our customers, we go through every application and we say, well, is this really a core application if your adoption is 30%? And where can we start to look at overlapping applications and what do you need to go all in on to tighten the bottom line for the next few quarters, as well as start to standardize your internal groups around singular products and functionality while still providing the freedom for employees to use solutions that they want, but also guiding them to the right ones for their needs. This is great. I want to pick up right away and talk about, you know, how do you begin that and how do you bring stakeholders together? And Liz, we'll pick up with you on that. You know, who was crucial initially at ZoomInfo around driving identity and SaaS management? Where did you begin and who did you bring into that conversation?
Right. So anytime you're trying to make an organizational change like this, you're not going to start just in one place. You're going to do a coalition, right? You're going to start to identify the needs of all of the different stakeholders. What is the problem case that they have? It's probably unique for each one, right? So our security team has a concern around access control. That's also a concern that's shared by finance. But we're also looking at places like HR that's wondering about how do we on and off board people quickly? How do we see how much it costs per person to have a particular stack of tools? And each of those things were places that you're trying to illuminate for those different stakeholders and really isolate what their problem is and if there's a unifying way that they can address that. And so the messaging that you have to each of those individual stakeholders really should be pivoted.
Yeah, awesome. You know, kind of correlating that to Xylo, we see, you know, when people want to understand software touches everybody in the organization and there's a lot of needs around it. So that's the first step for us. We have to identify, does finance care? Is budgeting a problem? Does your general IT organization care? Maybe enterprise architecture, security, software asset management, procurement is always a player in driving optimization, legal. These are all groups that care deeply about managing software internally. A lot of times it comes down to the procurement resources because if you're going to use software, you have to buy it at some point, and that's the only place where you can find it. It's not always on the network. It's not always in somebody's browser. So there's a lot of things that you bring together.
Each time, I mean, the question that I'm asked constantly is, what am I spending?
Yeah.
And that seems like a question that you should be able to answer very quickly, but it has so much nuance, right? You might say like your answer per head is different than your overall cost to the organization. Mm-hmm. Your you know, outlay one time is different than something that's recurrent.
Yeah.
How do you kind of anticipate when those cash outlays are going to occur? It's something that, especially when we're talking about two different locations, right? So a corporate card and a ERP system where you're trying to consolidate and be able to answer that question quickly. That's, you know, no small feat.
That's right. And I'd love to, I know we have a poll that we sent out. I'd love to be able to share the results of the poll to our admins on the line. There we are. And how long has identity management been a practice at your company? 4 years and longer. So identity management is an existing practice and an existing value point internally. SaaS management, it's brand new, and I think that the poll results share that. So Justin, I'd love to lean in with you a little bit. When you're working with new customers, maybe that's a little bit more on the pre-sale side than the success side, but who are those stakeholders internally that say we need an identity and a single sign-on strategy? Is it always just straight IT, or are there multiple folks internally that are a part of that?
So I think, Liz kind of gave a great view of what kind of happens before we get involved. I think there has to be kind of a driving force or a catalyst for change. And really, in a lot of the conversations that I have been a part of, both pre-sales and post-sales, it really helps to kind of have a top-down support. So making sure that you have an executive sponsor that backs the project. And really, it goes down to, I've seen this a lot more and more, is application owners. So people that own Workday, so being HR, people that own collaboration tools, making sure that they have kind of a seat at the table, because there's going to be a lot of changes that impact them from a process perspective, from signing on through identity management and lifecycle management. So I think you got to have, like I said, top-down support and making sure you have the right stakeholders at the table for the conversation.
That makes sense. Arun, how do you help customers that are beginning this journey, whether it's SaaS management or identity? How do you bring those stakeholders together, and how do they use Beyond ID to help?
Yeah, that's a great question. So just to add to what Liz and Justin said, really having the catalyst is key. I also believe that it's a great opportunity for procurement and IT team. It's a unique opportunity, I would say. It's to partner with business functions to really determine and define a strategy on how to drive a higher workforce productivity, at the same time security. And so what we see happening is that, and I think you were touching on that topic earlier about discovery, really having the understanding of the scope of what we're dealing with here, not only what you have, but also what you need, and analyzing, optimizing, executing, not only from SaaS management, which is relatively new, but also how it adds value back to the SSO strategy. I think that's important. Having visibility of SaaS apps is key. So we're spending time with our customers to understand those. What is the landscape of the what you need versus where you're going. Securing SaaS applications with the visibility what you have, and the world is going is more of the password less experience around how you're accessing these applications. Ability to add more security layers, including the step-up authentication, lifecycle management piece around onboarding and offboarding of users as they require this access to this application. These things are all important facets of what the customers need to be thinking about. So we help them across various strategies I just described, ultimately to be highly productive and also very secure in terms of the new set of standards around identity and security as concerned.
Yeah, that's awesome. And you led really well into the next topic, and I'll pick up on that. And that's discovery, right? Establishing that single view of software. And at Xylo, we've got our discovery process, which enables us to be able to confidently go back to our customers and say, we're looking at all of the software that your company is investing in, that your users are using, that you're using to drive value every single day. And that first value really creates then the ability to put a strategy in place. And so Arun, I'd love to pick up on that. Sometimes we call our system like a CRM of software applications. If you've got that, if you have full visibility into everything across your environment, you know who is using things and who those admin owners are and where the shadow IT is actually being buried right now. How does that change the approach to compliance when you're working with your customers today?
Yeah, so I would say that, the corporate drivers are, let's make sure, your workforce is being productive. At the same time, you want to make sure there's enough security. So you're not subjected to additional attack surfaces for hackers to coming and having access, unauthorized access to your systems. So the strategy is really around, having that first visibility, 360 view of what's happening is really important. And also, while we say that, there's also need, the companies have needs, the businesses have needs, so they go and use examples like credit card to subscribe to certain applications. How do you prevent that from happening? So that going back to the point I was making earlier about partnership from procurement and IT with business functions. So you are getting ahead of that and providing the opportunity to even do as far as flexible as bring your own application. So we'll help you with the procurement and security of that.
Yeah.
And those kind of approaches, I think, is better and really establishing a flexible and agile policy to keep the productivity high, but also the cost associated with managing SaaS, cost associated with security is also in check.
Yeah, great concept. And I love that you brought up governance. We've done a recent webinar where we asked everybody on the call, you know, where do you focus the most around SaaS? And the number one, well, it was tied, was governance and optimization. Now, governance is tricky. It's an ugly word. It's a clunky word. I think SaaS was created with a new mentality that, and we see that with product-led growth today as well, where users need solutions on demand, the consumerization of software. And I almost hate using the word governance, but governance is being turned on its head in the SaaS world. And it's freedom within a framework and the ability to get the right solution to the right people at the right time to drive value, productivity, and make it all make sense. And so governance is very, very top of mind, and it's something that we continue to evolve, and we drive a lot of value around that within our customer base. But it's an interesting conversation. Liz, I'd love to pick up a little bit on discovery with you as well. You know, when you guys at ZoomInfo did full discovery across your business, you know, what surprised you? What were some of the key areas that Xylo surfaced? Maybe some of it's around compliance. What were some of the first action items you took?
Well, you know, the phrase that comes to mind is where there's mystery, there's margin, and it wasn't ours. And that wasn't really an optimal space for us. I mean, a very obvious encounter that I was having that, I mean, still causes me pain, is that I spent ages negotiating with Adobe to make sure we were on the best, you know, discount structure, only to find that I had 50 people buying individual accounts. Mm-hmm. So neither were they getting the ability, could I offboard them? They're probably taking their IP with them. Mm-hmm. They're also, you know, just trickling in at a higher rate. None of those are things that I'm interested in doing. Right. And I saw that, you know, day one, our number of applications and duplicative applications was really much higher than I would like to admit publicly. You know, and there were a lot of opportunities that it helped me stagger and put prioritization around for when they were addressable, right? Yeah. So just because I could see that I had 3 applications that were all achieving the same function didn't mean that I could terminate all of them that same day, right? I needed to be able to create a migration path off of those products. I needed to be able to line that up with when a renewal was occurring. And a lot of those things were illuminated for me when we started seeing the totality. And, you know, that's again something that you see constantly when you're trying to combine stacks in high growth companies. You know, people have been trying to execute very quickly, and they are also working in kind of silos.
Yeah.
So it's, you know, I think we had more than your average number of SaaS applications, but I've seen that steadily tick down, which has been pretty cool.
That's great. That's great to hear. Justin, I'd love to ask you a little bit about that. You know, when we're working with our customers today, we're encouraging, you know, the use certainly of single sign-on, but as single sign-on is used and identity is used around applications, it almost becomes more of a managed category. And as Liz mentioned, she has 50 people expensing a piece of software. They're signing up on click wrap terms. Their IP they're taking with them. It's still a little bit of the Wild West. How do you see single sign-on solutions, identity solutions, and SaaS management being able to add value to build a bigger strategy overall?
Oh my gosh. I mean, I think it's honestly a make or break. I mean, if you look at the past of how companies used to manage applications, users would have separate logins and separate passwords for email, for Salesforce, for their instant messenger tool that they were using then. You know, moving to an SSO model, to an identity management model, having that single username, that single password, not only is a better user experience, but it's also more secure. I mean, you know, you're alleviating the need or the use of common passwords like password 123. I mean, let's be honest, you're not always going to get rid of them. I mean, they're still prevalent, but being able to have admins manage, you know, application passwords, different things like that, it allows, you know, the balance between security and user experience.
Yeah, that's great. Moving on to the next area, maximizing that value of licenses. And Liz, I'll pick on you a little bit here for this concept, which is right in your wheelhouse. What were you able to, you know, working with Xylo, what were you able to surface from a cost savings perspective? You talked a little bit about application overlap, and how did you prioritize everything? How did you look at your stack and say, boy, we see overlaps and we see underutilized licensing and we see inefficient purchasing? And how did you begin that journey on SaaS management and kind of cleaning up a lot of what you didn't know?
Right. And I mean, I think that the interesting thing here is, number one, that the right number of applications is not necessarily one for a function, right? You're going to have overlap, and that's going to be appropriate for certain things. But I don't need 12 ESPs. That's not going to happen, right? So for me, I wanted to hit the things that were going to be of the most value. So I needed to know what my top spend in different categories were. I wanted to hit them as soon as possible. So I needed to know exactly when my renewal calendars were. And then I wanted to hit things that were going to be the least impact to my operations. So I needed to know who and what teams were using and what kind of penetration those were having, right? So it didn't necessarily mean that I was going to terminate things, but even just being able to right size them was a huge priority for me.
Yeah.
So in Xylo, I can see a renewals calendar, and I can also see, because it's integrated with Okta, I can see people's frequency in logging in. And those two pieces of information are invaluable.
That's great. I do want to take a quick moment. We had a comment come in the Q&A portal from AJ Witt. Hi, AJ out there. AJ's with the ITAM review, IT asset management. And he mentioned on governance, it's absolutely about guardrails and training wheels. You need to nudge your employees to do the right thing. And that comes from education, visibility, peer leadership. Anything else will get in the way of the value derived from the software. If there's one thing you can guarantee, is that if there's a hard policy, people will try to find a way around it. I don't think I could have described that any better. That is the new world of governance within cloud and SaaS subscriptions. So thanks, AJ. That's amazing. Arun, I'd love to pick up on that. You know, we've talked about discovery and that value prop being Xylo's going to know every application. And once you know those applications, I mean, we do it with our customers. We give them a roadmap. We found these 150 applications, and these are the ones that can go directly into Xylo, and you should be putting them behind your single sign-on solution and getting everything to work well together. And then a lot of times we'll pull you in. So how do you help customers with newly discovered applications drive value via Okta?
Yeah, absolutely. So just in the journey of what I think Liz was sharing earlier about the login, how often people are logging in. So I think about three things and how we're helping our customers is, first, all the application you discover, the first thing you got to do is make sure they are secure access. So the good news is that the standards that are available now allows you to accessing the application without even entering a password. So that's part of the good news for users, because they don't have to log in through another password, having to remember the password and all that. So that's the one biggest value add immediately. So anything you discover, you should be securing them through single sign-on experience requiring no password. So the first thing is that. Secondly is that you also want to make sure the onboarding and offboarding of application for the user's access, whether it's a birthright application from the day one of an employment, or the changes the job, or someone leaving the job. You also want to make sure that the access is being granted and revoked on a real-time basis. So that means the productivity level is very high when it comes to managing those applications for the users when they need it, and as long as they're authorized to have access to those applications. The third thing is vendor management, right? So it's basically, if you're literally, every company has hundreds of applications you're managing, you want to be able to understand the life cycle of that application and the contractual commitments you have for that applications. Having a good insight into all of the work that's been done and how often the application is being utilized and the uses, all of that is very critical in really understanding the value you're getting from that application. This is where the vendor management is critical, and the SaaS management provides that insight about what that is, unlike any other application solution we see. So combination of the identity and SaaS management platform gives you much better visibility on how to do that very effectively.
That's great.
And I would also just mention one of the great things that we had to engage in is to identify who our owners were, right? So the difference between an administrative owner and somebody who is responsible for the budget associated with that, and having a location that we could quickly say to that owner, we saw a new license pop up that wasn't under your org. Should that exist, is something that we, is very helpful for that governance, but also for being able to take action on it without having to do a research project.
Yeah, great.
We'll hit a few kind of rapid fire topics as we're approaching the time for Q&A, and we've got some great questions that have been submitted. I want to talk about, analyzing Okta utilization detail, and Justin, would love your perspective on this. It's a little bit of a deviation from the earlier question on single sign-on and SaaS management strategy and how those work together. But what information is important from a SaaS management provider that can really move the needle for a single sign-on solution or an identity program such as Okta?
Yeah, I mean, I think the information is valuable. I think it provides insight into applications that you may not have visibility into. So that can be from a security standpoint of being able to identify those applications and secure them. And the other side also, as well is new applications. So I think your end users know what apps work best for them. And if you can see a trend of, frequently used applications that your end users are using, that might be a good app to invest in and leverage going forward.
Yeah, I agree with that. And with a lot of our customers today, we spin a lot around single sign-on. We talk a lot about SAML enforcement, where you're enforcing the logins to applications and there are no back doors. That is really information that you can rely on to make a lot of internal business decisions. Getting at the logging detail that's sitting in there allows you to make those informed decisions like Liz talked about earlier. Who's logging in? Just that baseline information from a single sign-on provider gives you that information you need to start to make decisions around, if we have 5 solutions, what's adopted the most? Where do we have users not accessing specific solutions? So to really drive that value, it's a fun process internally with customers to identify what else they need to get behind single sign-on and start driving value as they do that. So I appreciate that. Last up is really extending security across your entire network. And it's a bigger concept, but Arun, I'd love to know, what are some of the key compliance areas that Zylo and Okta raise to the surface, and how do you help your customers with that joint identity strategy?
Yeah, absolutely. I think as you were discussing about having visibility and this, ability to discover what you have. So first thing is the inventory of all SaaS applications, what you have as well as what you need. And because the need will constantly evolve, rationalization of applications are critical, but also, as Liz was saying, you don't need 5 different applications for the same business function, that if you can do it 1 or 2, or maybe 1 down to 1 that provided the biggest function. Securing all applications the whole idea of single access gateway and reducing attack surface is critical for, building a very, very highly flexible security infrastructure. Having dynamic access policies, make sure that you have a plan to secure all the applications based on any device, any locations. And one of the things, if you haven't done any research, it is the whole framework called NIST 800 guidelines. And it especially talks about access control policy. There's one that's called Zero Trust Architecture that just got published last February. It's fairly new, but the need for every company And what Department of Commerce, National Institute of Science and Technology has done is they've basically said this is the guideline of how you are going to secure your organization, and giving your workforce and customers the best possible environment to be most productive. And these are the guidelines you need to establish: access level and verifying users' identity. So I'll highly recommend that you look into that, because one of the things we do there is going back to the governance topic that Corey was bringing it up. Although it's an ugly word, but what you're looking for is the access management and certifications, right? So meaning that if are you absolutely sure as an organization that only people who are supposed to have access at any given point are having access to that application, and making sure that there's no data breaches happening. And that includes not only the secure access to those applications, but ability to absolutely verify when you're provisioning and deprovisioning those users as a part of onboarding or offboarding of these users as they come to work and they leave the work or they change their job, whatnot. So those are some of the things practically what you can do to ensure that you're compliant using the best of breed SaaS, as SSO, as well as the SaaS management platforms.
Yeah, well put. Thank you very much for that. I don't think I could have said anything better around all of that. So great response. Would love to launch our next poll very quickly around company priorities that we've got for the next 3 months. So you should see that come up. There we go. So take a stab at that, and I'll pose another question around that actionable strategy. We talked a little bit about COVID-19, but Liz, I would love to kind of pick your brain. What do you see happening internally at ZoomInfo over the next 6 months? And how is the information within Xylo and Okta allowing you to become a little more proactive rather than seeing the problem and having to respond to it and potentially having that be a little too late?
Yeah, I mean, I think our product is uniquely positioned to be something that's really supportive of a work from home initiative. Yeah. And so I think when we look at it, it's how do we make sure that we're aligning with the goals of businesses to continue to add that value and empower people to be successful. Personally, I think, we've rolled out another 1.3 million phone numbers so that you can make contacts directly to folks just this week. And I know that there's a lot more expected. But when we look at how we do that internally, we have to be confident that our security is above board. Mm-hmm. And so, we started our Okta implementation in October, and we've only seen, more applications added. I think one of the questions from QA that I saw was, how do we justify the tax? And I mean, I think to some degree, I do find it frustrating, but I also understand that it takes a lot of action on the part of companies to make sure that they're building infrastructure that's really secure. But it means that we prioritize vendors that, as we go through that implementation, that are native, yep. Right? And that those become easier to use for people, and that has a trickle-down effect on people's adoption.
Yeah, it sure does. As we think about the next 6 months, as we think about the COVID world, both Okta and Xylo have a role to play in that. So, we're looking to customers, we're running free SaaS audits, giving visibility into discovery for non-customers today to lean in on during these times, your entire employee base moving remote. What can we do to get customers to value very, very quickly? And that's our way of doing that. Justin, at Okta, what is Okta doing right now to kind of lean into these times and work with customers in ways that maybe you haven't historically?
Yeah, I mean, the first thing that we're doing is we do have like the emergency response. So you do have access to, kind of a jump start to allowing your employees to work remote. So I think we give like 5 applications that you can do for SSO for free. But really now that we're in the thick of it is understanding what the new normal is going to look like, and what does that, staged approach look as going back into into the office. And I think, a lot of companies, I read an article the other day on Business Insider that, companies are starting to reevaluate their real estate perspective. They're seeing that their employees are just as effective and just as, productive remote as they are in an office. So what does that look like? So still being able to enable your end users to be productive remote or in the office. So really just kind of coming alongside of those companies as they start to plan what the next, 2 quarters look like, 2 or 3 quarters look like as they start phasing back into the new normal.
I love that. And that's great. I think it's everybody's responsibility to find, their value and to lean in on that during these times. And I think most good companies are doing that. I do want to save a little bit of time for Q&A. We've got a few of them that came in that are really good. And Justin, I'd love to pick up on the last one directly with you and get your input here. Came in from John Tomany on the call. I'd love for you to speak a little bit more to the issue of HR's responsibilities in onboarding and offboarding. The majority of companies he's consulted for have solid onboarding processes, but are weak in offboarding, often removing past employee internal network access, but leaving SaaS login accounts open. How do you guys handle offboarding and to a little more of extent onboarding as well internally at Okta?
Yeah, I think that's a great question that a lot of companies are starting to kind of think about. And the easiest way that I look at it is you look at the life cycle of an identity. Where does an identity begin and end? And in most cases in the past, it used to be AD. And now looking at kind of what companies are approaching now, the beginning and ends in HR. So we see a lot of companies are doing what's called HR as a master. So you're driving all of the life cycle events and triggers from HR. So when a new employee is onboarded, they're put into Workday or PeopleSoft or any other HR tool that you use. That will then kick off, workflows or provisioning events into applications and so on and so forth. So you ensure that they have kind of a great day one experience. And on the inverse, when, they term or they get a new role, being able to execute an event out of HR that then goes through and deactivates access to SaaS applications or, email, so on and so forth.
Yeah, I love that. Next question, Liz, I like this one a lot. We work with our customers a lot on this today. Can you think of any examples where you saw growing usage of an unsanctioned application in Okta that led you to consider replacing it with whatever it was competing with? The example given is Box, Dropbox, Slack, Teams. File storage and sharing is always a nebulous area for our customers. And if so, how easy was it to make a decision compared to the data in Xylo for the incumbent? Have you had any of those examples or early insights that you're leaning in on yet?
Well, yes. So I think that there's 2 things there, right? So one, if you have a bunch of unsanctioned usage, it tells you that there's a need within your company to use that. And typically at the single or, 1 to 5 user level, they're not using an enterprise product.
Right.
And so the first thing is likely that if that's something that we're seeing many accounts on, then we would probably want to enter into negotiated terms with an enterprise agreement, right? And typically at that enterprise agreement level, we'll see things like SSO, and we'll see, all of the other types of governance features and, license management occur.
Yep.
Yes. It also means that it's an opportunity for us to centralize on it. Right. And so that often will become a opportunity where we'll target a lot of the different users and start to build out an internal RFP, right? We already have the use case to do that we're essentially piloting on. And now we're just going to decide what makes the most financial sense and what makes the most operational sense. But yes, we absolutely did that. And we saw that a ton, especially in the file storage space.
Yeah.
So, which I'm sure you can see.
Security teams usually get very, very nervous when there's a lot of file storage and sharing, and you're fundamentally storing company information in third-party solutions secured on a click run.
Yeah, and I think we saw that. Like one of the things that I was surprised by was just the pure number of survey tools that we had. Like, how many survey tools do you possibly need? Mm-hmm. Consolidating all of that information, and they're certainly not all connected to like your Salesforce or your other, CRM tools.
Right.
So that one was a nice target.
Sure. That's fantastic. Thank you for that feedback. And last question here that came in, and Justin, I would love your feedback a little bit on this, and I'll share my perspective. Greg Karp Newfield asks, when you start implementing an SSO and SaaS management strategy at your organization, how do you justify the single sign-on tax that some vendors force upon that? Typically in an enterprise tier or even a specific tier that is related directly to single sign-on. And I'll answer our perspective on that and how we coach our customers. That's usually in the higher growth segment of the market, younger companies that don't have the ability to invest in that, and they're trying to make trade-offs and decisions around how far to go with security. In the enterprise space, it's a no-brainer. The value is there and it's articulated, and it's so important that an enterprise tier they're probably going to be paying for already, and it will include any single sign-on support. But that value exists there in the commercial space or down market as well. So we encourage all of our customers to be doing that and looking for creative ways to make sure that they can have as much behind single sign-on as possible. But Justin, I'd love to hear your thoughts on how do you guys work with vendors on that, and how is that shifting today in the market?
Yeah, I think I kind of have a different perspective because that, working with vendors might be outside of my pay grade. I look at it from the perspective of not necessarily cost of doing business. I think that's kind of a cold term, but, companies do have, costs and, like Liz alluded to earlier, making sure that they have the right security in place for those applications. And I think of it from the perspective of, with the climate around breaches and hacks and things like that, you want to make sure that your vendors are investing in security, and whether that be through the tax that you pay. I would rather err on the side of paying a small tax to ensure that I have a secure application than versus paying the outcome of, my company's brand being in the news. I think that's kind of the as bold and as drastic as that is, that's kind of the approach that I take.
Yeah. And I agree with that. I think it does fall in line with my approach sometimes, which is it is a cost of doing business. It's a vital cost that is probably one that you've got to prioritize ahead of other voluntary decisions in across your company. You need to have an identity strategy. You need to secure all of your applications. And in doing so, you're driving back-end value around who's using all of these solutions. How they're being utilized, onboarding and offboarding, provisioning and deprovisioning. The value that you get on the back end of a single sign-on identity solution far outweighs the cost to move up to that next tier, although sometimes it can be material.
And I mean, even building onto that, the cost of enabling those features, so the company being able to build into their application, the ability for lifecycle management and different things like that is definitely crucial.
Yeah, thank you. Great question, Greg. We are coming up on the end of the segment, so we're now at the place where we'd love to kick off our survey. Please remember to complete this survey to designate whether or not you'd like to receive the $25 Grubhub gift card to support local businesses, or have our sponsors donate to the Khan Academy on your behalf. I want to take a moment to really thank everybody that's been on the panel today. Liz, Justin, Arun, you guys are shaping the industry and the market in identity, in supporting customers around that. And Liz at ZoomInfo, where we are also a customer, you guys are helping sales organizations understand and reach who they're selling to in a big, big way. Really enjoyed all the conversation today. And if anybody on the line has an outreach, please submit questions. We can always reach out to Arun, Justin, and Liz after the conversation. But a huge round of applause and thank you to everybody on the panel. And thanks to everybody for joining the webinar today. It's been a fun conversation, and we'll see you next time.
Thanks, guys.
Thanks, everyone.
All right, take care.